Names of Katharine Hepburn. They went on dates behind her back with 7 lesbian actresses she hates the most. Katharine Hepburn was born Katharine Ton Hepburn on May 12, 1907, in Hartford, Connecticut. She came from a progressive and smart family. Dr. Thomas Hepburn, her father, was a well-known urologist who fought hard for public health and knowledge of venereal diseases. Katharine Martha Ton Hepburn, her mother, was a major figure in the movement for women's rights and fought for women's right to vote. Growing up in such an educated family had a big impact on Hepburn's sense of duty and independence. She was pushed to think for herself and question social rules, which gave her a strong will and a firm belief in personal freedom that would define both her public and private life. She went to Bryn Mawr College and finished in 1928 with a degree in history and philosophy. After that, she became interested in acting. Her first few times in the theater were full of both excitement and trouble. She was fired from several jobs because she was too loud or different. Still, she didn't give up. Unlike the shy and traditional actors of her time, she had a unique voice, an angular beauty, and an athletic build. But soon, these traits would turn out to be her best features. Katharine Hepburn's big break came in 1932, when she played the lead in A Divorce Bill with John Barrymore. Both audiences and reviewers were impressed by her performance, which put her in the spotlight. Over the next few years, she was in a number of important movies, including Morning Glory, 1933, for which she got her first Academy Award, Little Women, 1933, and Alice Adams, 1935. Even though she was successful at first, her fame went up and down, and in the late 1930s, after a string of commercial failures, she was even called box office poison. But Hepburn didn't run away from Hollywood. Instead, she took charge of her work in a brave and new way. In 1940, she bought the film rights to the play The Philadelphia Story and sold them to MGM on the condition that she would play the lead part. This helped her make a comeback. The movie was a big hit and a turning point in her career. It made her a bankable star again and showed how great she was at making smart comedies. It also showed how good she was at playing smart, funny women who didn't fit standard gender roles. This was a niche she would master and return to many times over the course of her career. Hepburn's work shows what a wide range of styles and choices she has. She was just as interesting in tragedies like The African Queen, 1951, as she was in screwball comedies like Bringing Up Baby, 1938, and The Philadelphia Story, 1940. That same summer, 1959, and Long Day's Journey into Night, 1962. Together with Spencer Tracy, both on and off screen, she made 9 memorable movies and had one of the most famous love relationships in movie history. Tracy was married and had never been divorced, so their connection was private and complicated. However, it was deep and lasting 26 years until he died in 1967. Hepburn had some of her most important artistic successes in the second half of her career. She won 3 more Oscars for her roles in the movies On Golden Pond, 1981, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, 1967, and The Lion in Winter, 1968. Each part showed that she was still relevant and had a strong presence. It also showed that her emotional resonance as an actress was growing. She had become a living celebrity by the time of her last movie role in Love Affair in 1994. Lello Ogden Smith was Katharine Hepburn's only husband. He was a wealthy Philadelphia socialite and businessman with old money ties and a genteel upbringing that was very different from the fiercely independent and outspoken personality that would define Hepburn's whole life and career. They met while she was at Bryn Mawr College, a prestigious liberal arts school for women known for its high standards and open-minded atmosphere. At the time, Hepburn was still figuring out who she was as a woman and as a performer. Lello, who was charming, well-groomed, and steady, may have seemed like a safe, traditional choice for a short time. They dated pretty quickly and got married on December 12, 1928. Katharine was only 21 years old at the time and wasn't sure what her future held. Lello was 29 years old at the time and was already well known in the business and social circles of the East Coast's elite. But Hepburn showed almost right away that he was unhappy with the restrictions of married life. Even from a young age, she didn't want to play the traditional roles that upper-class wives are supposed to play. She insisted that Ledlow officially change his name to S, which shows how uncomfortable she was with traditional femininity and identity. She changed his first and last names backwards to avoid being known as Kate Smith, which she thought was a boring and unremarkable name. She really wanted to be different and make her own identity, even in something as formal and important as getting married. This strange but telling act showed that. Even though they said they would get married, Hepburn never really committed to married life. Her strong desire and growing obsession with a future on stage and screen quickly took precedence over keeping the peace at home. For her, acting was more than just a job. It was a calling, a burning desire that made the more normal tasks of being a wife seem less important. Also, her fiery, brave, and determined nature often clashed with Smith's calm and quiet one. He was polite and well-behaved, but Hepburn, who was emotional and impulsive, found his quiet personality boring and not compatible with her active way of life. Hepburn's relationship with her agent, Leland Hayward, an important person in the entertainment business, made things even more complicated. During the last few years of her marriage, they were having an affair, which showed how mentally distant she had become from her husband. Hayward, who was married at the time, not only dated Hepburn romantically, but also helped and guided her professionally at a key point in her early career. Because of love and desire, they were together. When she moved to Hollywood in 1932, it was the last straw for her marriage. A career-defining choice that showed she was breaking all the rules of normal behavior. The mental and physical distance between her and Smith grew until they could no longer get back together. Hepburn filed for divorce in the Mexican state of Yucatan on April 30, 1934. At that time, Yucatan was known for quick and private divorces. On May 8, 1934, the marriage was finally over. Even though they were no longer close emotionally and Lello had been cheating on her, Hepburn was still thankful to him for always being there for her when she was a young actress having a hard time. Later, in an incredibly honest book, she wrote that she had cheated on him by taking advantage of his kindness, calling herself a terrible pig for taking advantage of his love for her. Surprisingly, they stayed friends long after their marriage ended, and they kept in touch until Smith's death in 1979, which shows how unique the bond they had was. After Hepburn moved to California to focus on her acting career, her relationship with Leland Hayward grew stronger. At the start of the relationship, they were both still formally married, but things quickly got serious between them. Hayward finally got a divorce from his wife and asked Hepburn to marry him, but she said no. Her refusal showed how strongly she believed in her own independence and how skeptical she was about marriage after her first experience with it. She later gave an honest reason for her choice, saying, "I like the idea of being my own single self." This short statement said a lot about how independent she has always been and how she doesn't want love relationships to define her life. The relationship with Hayward ran for 4 years and was marked by times of strong feelings and the usual conflict between love and work. In 1936, while traveling with the play Jane Eyre, Hepburn started a new, public relationship with Howard Hughes, an entrepreneur who is mysterious and very rich. Hughes was a famous aviator, inventor, and film director, and he was known for being strange, smart, and private. Things that both interested and annoyed Hepburn. A year ago, their mutual friend and fellow singer Cary Grant put them in touch. And right from the start, a lot of people were interested in their bond. Hughes was truly in love with Hepburn and was said to have wanted to marry her. Their relationship was often talked about in gossip columns and fan mags, which often made guesses that they were going to get engaged soon. But, like Hayward, Hepburn didn't want to be tied down to a man, especially when her job was in danger. Even though Hepburn had early critical success, his fame at the box office had dropped by the mid-1930s. People thought that some of her performances were too intellectual or cold for general audiences, and the roles she picked didn't always make moviegoers like her. In 1938, the Independent Theater Owners of America called her box office poison, which was a bad name that made her less marketable. Hepburn left Hollywood to think about what happened and start over. During this time, her only goal was to revive her fading fame. This goal didn't leave much room for marriage or even keeping up a personal relationship. Hepburn and Hughes broke up in the end because her worries about her job and Hughes's growing eccentricities made their relationship weak. Even though they stayed friendly, their personalities and goals were just too different for a long-term relationship to work. Since they broke up when she was having a bad time at work, it wasn't a big deal. It was more of a quiet going away. The relationship was still an important part of Hepburn's daily life. This was another time when her loyalty to her job came before her desire to be with someone. There were not many names that stood out more in Hollywood's golden age than Katharine Hepburn's. She left a legacy unlike any other with her razor-sharp wit, fierce independence, and 4 Academy Awards for Best Actor, which is a record. But behind the strong, sure-of-herself actress was a woman whose personal life was very mysterious, especially when it came to love. People in Hollywood made a lot of stories about her long-term relationship with Spencer Tracy, but biographers and historians have long talked about the relationships she never talked about with other women. There have been many stories over the years that Hepburn was dating a number of famous actresses. Some biographers and Hollywood insiders say that Hepburn once made a personal list of 7 women she had secretly dated and later came to hate for reasons ranging from betrayal to heartbreak. She never talked about these relationships in public, and there is no solid proof that they happened. They were all famous actresses in their own right, and they all lived during the same time as Hepburn. Love, secrecy, and desire all came together in a complicated emotional landscape. 1. Tallulah Bankhead, who was known for her husky voice, outrageous wit, and unapologetic hedonism, was just as bold in real life as she was in movies. Some biographers say that she first crossed paths with Hepburn at a fancy party in the late 1930s. Bankhead was openly gay in private, and it was said that Hepburn fell in love with her sharp tongue and flair for the theater. It was said that they had an affair, but it was intense but unstable because Bankhead was unpredictable and Hepburn was quiet. Hepburn later called her an emotional hurricane I never should have stepped into, because the relationship ended in bitter silence. Number 2, Barbara Stanwyck. Barbara Stanwyck was another highly independent woman in Hollywood. She was known for her strong will and powerful performances. In the 1940s, there were whispers among studio employees and hints in coded Hollywood gossip magazines that Stanwyck and Hepburn were having an affair. Reports say that the two women had a short but strong relationship during a time of personal change in both of their lives. Later, Hepburn is said to have said, "Stanwyck was a mirror of myself that I couldn't bear to keep looking into." This may have been a reference to how the affair made her feel. 3. Hi, Greta Garbo. Greta Garbo, the mysterious Swedish actor, once said, "I want to be alone." But Hepburn was said to have broken through that emotional wall, if only for a short time. In the late 1930s, the two famous people were seen together at private retreats in upstate New York. Garbo even asked Hepburn to her private Manhattan apartment more than once. Based on possible biographies, their partnership was marked by emotional distance and quiet intensity. 4th, Joan Crawford. Hepburn reportedly got annoyed with Garbo's lack of interest and later said, "She never let anyone truly know her, not even me." Joan Crawford was a force of nature. She was beautiful, driven, and wildly ambitious. Hollywood lore says that Hepburn and Crawford had a confusing relationship that went from rivalry to love. If the affair did happen, it was short and full of stress. Some reports say that Hepburn felt suffocated by Crawford's need for fame, while Crawford was said to have said that Hepburn wasn't mentally available. She played strong women, Hepburn is said to have said, but she couldn't handle one in real life. 5. Hey, Mercedes D'Acosta. In this list, Mercedes D'Acosta is the only woman who has freely said she loved other women. She is a famous playwright and poet. Marlene Dietrich and Greta Garbo were among D'Acosta's known affairs, and she is also said to have dated Audrey Hepburn for a short time. Letters and diaries, even though Hepburn herself has never stated this in public, point to a short relationship. Hepburn may have kept her distance from D'Acosta because she was afraid of being found out, especially since D'Acosta has a reputation for being immoral. She was a lovely writer, Hepburn is said to have told a friend. But I couldn't trust her with my silence. She was bright, bubbly, and very smart. Judy Holliday was a surprise addition to Hepburn's inner circle. Their friendship reportedly grew stronger while they worked together at Colia Pictures, where mutual respect turned into affection. Holliday, who was struggling with the stresses of fame and identity, turned to Hepburn for support. Their relationship turned romantic for a short time before Holliday ended it suddenly because she was afraid for her career. Hepburn was said to have felt betrayed and later said, "She chose the stage over truth, and I can't fault her for that, but I couldn't forgive it either." 7th, Dorothy Arsner. Arsner wasn't an actress, but she was the only female director in Hollywood's studio system in the 1930s and 1940s, and she was a lesbian who was well known in private circles. She directed some of Hepburn's contemporaries and was known as both a teacher and a quiet revolutionary. There are rumors that Arsner and Hepburn had a close personal relationship and maybe even a romantic one. However, some film historians say that Arsner was one of Hepburn's first romantic partners. Hepburn reportedly didn't like how Arsner wouldn't go beyond friendship in public, which caused a rift between them. "She taught me to command a scene," Hepburn is said to have said, but never to claim a heart. In her later years, Katharine Hepburn had a very philosophical and calm view of death. In a famous interview in her 80s, she talked about her own death and said, "I have no fear of death. Must be wonderful like a long sleep," she thought. Hepburn's quiet, thoughtful acceptance of death showed how strong and independent she had been throughout her life and career. She was admired for her fierce intelligence and talent on screen, as well as for her unwavering individuality and inner strength, traits that showed in her thoughts on death. Instead of showing fear or anxiety, she was open to the idea of eternal rest, which shows a peace with the cycle of life that not many people can achieve so fully and in public. However, Hepburn's health started to slowly get worse soon after her last movie role in the 1994 TV movie Love Affair. She went to the hospital in March 1993 because she was so tired, which is often a sign of deeper frailty, especially in older people. She had been active her whole life and lived on her own well into her 80s, but this was one of the first big signs that her once infinite energy was waning. Even though she was sick, Hepburn kept her condition and recovery a secret, as she always did. In the winter of 1996, she was admitted to the hospital again, this time for pneumonia, a serious illness that can be life-threatening for older people. The illness made her much weaker and started to weaken the strong body that had helped her through so many physically demanding roles in her younger years. People over 65 often have long-lasting effects from pneumonia, and this case was no different. Hepburn's recovery was slow, and she spent more and more time at home in Connecticut, with her close family, and away from public life. By 1997, her physical decline had become noticeably worse. Reports said she was so weak that she barely spoke and had almost lost her appetite. Those closest to her thought she might be dying soon because she seemed to be physically and emotionally withdrawing from the world around her. But even in this state, Hepburn clung to life with a quiet tenacity, living longer than many expected. This was a testament to the same willpower that had helped her get through decades of problems in Hollywood and beyond. During her last years, Hepburn's mental abilities started to get worse. It was thought that she might have been suffering from dementia, a disease that affects memory, communication, and reasoning. She had always been proud of how smart and articulate she was, but as the disease got worse, it made it harder for her to interact with the world the way she used to. But the people who knew her best could still recognize her as a woman of great character and quiet dignity, facing the end of her life on her own terms. By 2000, Hepburn had become almost completely hidden from public view. Her niece called her a private person, which showed a change that had been happening for a long time. The woman who used to stun people with her fierce presence and brilliant mind now lived quietly in her family home in Fenwick, Connecticut, away from the eyes of the public. Friends and family visited her often, and even though her world had shrunk, she was still surrounded by love and respect. In July 2001, she had to go to the hospital again because of her weak health. This time, she had pneumonia and a urinary tract infection at the same time. Both of these illnesses made her even weaker, and even though she got better, it was clear that her body was slowly giving out from old age and illness. Hepburn never seemed to change her stoicism, though. She refused invasive medical treatments and interventions, choosing instead a path of comfort and dignity. The last part of Hepburn's life began in earnest in May 2003, when an aggressive tumor was found in her neck. After much thought and with her family's permission, the decision was made not to go through surgery or medical intervention. Palliative care was decided to be the most compassionate thing to do for Katharine Hepburn when she was 96 years old and her body was weak from years of illness and her quality of life had gone down. She spent her last weeks in the same beloved home where she had spent so much of her life. On June 29, 2003, she died peacefully on the beach in Fenwick on Long Island Sound. The official cause of her death was cardiac arrest. She died at home, where she was comfortable, knowing that she had lived her life exactly the way she had wanted to, fearlessly, without apology, and with a fierce commitment to being herself. Her death marked the end of an amazing era in American culture and film. Like the kind of person she was, Hepburn made it clear that she didn't want any kind of public memorial service to be held in her honor. She had never sought fame the way many of her peers did, and even in death, she stuck to her lifelong goal of keeping control over her image and legacy. She was buried in Cedar Hill Cemetery in Hartford, Connecticut, not far from where she had grown up and where she had strong family and personal ties. Her grave is still a quiet tribute to a woman whose bravery, intelligence, and unbreakable spirit changed the world of movies and inspired generations. Damn it.